YouTube. Captain out here at Squirrel Acres. A beautiful Sunday early afternoon, doing a little tinkering on Nasty, having an ice cold Bush NA. No, they're not always NAs, but they're a lot more NAs than used to be NAs because I didn't drink NAs and they used to suck. They're not bad now. All right, let's get to the point. Possibly have come up with the ultimate off-road throttle setup. All right, without beating around the bush and dragging this out, because you folks want to see what we're talking about here, and you know how I gab. All right, throttles seem to be a big issue. See a lot of broken cables, a lot of stretch cables, a lot of linkages falling off, binding up in the mud and all that kind of stuff. All right, this one is more to tackle actually the throttle jockey, as I call it, from my last video. Blah, 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 blah. You're going over the bumps and your foot's bouncing on a throttle. Drives you nuts. Folks, if you're not 100% comfortable on your machine, you are not going to be able to ride it to your potential. Guaranteed, absolute, bar none. Get comfortable. Move things around. Change things. As much as changing the tension on your throttle or changing your brake pedal position a half an inch can make a day and night difference. Tinker with them, folks. Get them to where you're happy with them. You're not going to be able to ride it properly. All right, so let's take a sip of this Bush NA. We'll spin the potato around and we'll go over the ultimate throttle setup. Yeah. All right, let's start with a little throttle 101 here, okay? Most guys run a cable. Might have a long cable, short cable. All right, shorter the cable, the less bends you have in it, the better. All right, that's just basic throttle setup. If you want to see something really crazy, because there's issues with these cable throttles binding up, they get mud on here and then it works the mud down in here as you're actuating the throttle. The Kentucky boys, I think it was Giver the Beans that actually started it. Those boys have some of the most janky, goofy throttle setups I have personally ever seen in my life, and guess what? They have zero issues. Don't laugh at what people come up with, because they have zero throttle problems at all. They actually run a cable through pulleys with no housing. It's just a bare cable hanging out. And guess what? It works. It absolutely works. Anyhow, let's get back to this. You know, you see guys all the time, at least I do, got giant return springs up here. Why? You should not need a giant spring. Look at this. Yeah, you can look at that too. It's actually zip tied. That's what happens sometimes. You got to make something janky, you know? All right, anyhow, point being, one finger to work that throttle. You don't need a big spring up here. If you have to run a gigantic spring up here, you've got an issue downstream somewhere. You either got a real crappy cable, you got a cable that's too long, you got too many bends and kinks in it. Make a direct route and make where your cable comes out right here as straight as possible. Don't have this kind of crap going on, all right? You should be able to take that cable and move it back and forth completely free without that spring on there, and your throttle should follow. Now, the problem is, and also the reason some people may like to run a heavy spring on there, is because of the throttle jockey issue. You're going over the bumps and you only got 2 pounds of pressure to push this down. Your foot's going like this and it's a right? From my last video, yeah, I said that. Throttle jockey, all right? It sucks. It's hard to control the machine. This is the first thing you can do. Put a little spring in there. Play with your tensions. Now when your foot's bouncing, you have a little bit of give, if you can see that spring going, all right? That is a game changer. That was something I came up with on the B1, even with the stock 18 horse Oppie on this thing. It was real jumpy over bumps. That helps immensely. Now, what the hell is this? Captain, why do you have, that's right, that's a Briggs stock opposed twin intake valve spring. Why do you have a spring that big under there you could push on it? You just told us don't put a great big spring on there. This is all right in here. This has absolutely no influence on this cable. I am not relying on a great big spring up there to pull this throttle back up. I am relying on this big spring down here to actually push the throttle back, okay? Now, part of the throttle jockey issue, more tension on the throttle pedal makes a big difference. This little spring makes a huge difference, all right? The third thing is if you got that much on there, that much tension, it'll still have a tendency to bounce. You need something to produce a little bit of drag. So what did I do? Got some leather and cut out a couple of leather washers. All right. These these washers right here are tack welded to the throttle pedal. So I actually put the leather in there and then just use this bolt to change the amount of tension. All right, and you can watch it right here. See how it's sliding on the leather, okay? That will provide enough tension. If it doesn't, tighten this up a little more. Now, obviously, if you tighten that bolt right down, even with the leather in there that allows a little slip, you can bind this thing right up. I can compress that spring and tighten that up and the throttle isn't coming up, all right? If this spring was not in here, this throttle would stick right on the floor. That little spring up here on the top would not be able to overcome the leather right here for tension, okay? Are you following me? Get a big spring underneath to push it up. You don't want to have anything with a lot of tension on that cable or on the carburetor, or you're going to have issues, okay? Here's another trick for you. If you're running a cable style throttle, take a little piece of heat shrink tubing and put it over there and shrink it down. This will help knock the mud and debris off and not pull it up into your throttle. Obviously, you don't want the heat shrink tubing to actually shrink down and be completely tight on that. So you got to play with sizes. You can actually bind the cable right up with a piece of heat shrink tubing. All right. Anyhow, folks, that is the ultimate setup. It's a game changer. You've got to be comfortable on these things, right? Right. All right. Let's spin this potato around. Excuse me. That's it for another episode of Doing Stupid Things with Captain. Hey, try out your throttle issues. If you got any questions or comments or anything, leave them down below. Really interested to see and always interested in helping you folks out, all right? If you've gotten this far with a tractor and you're struggling with your throttle, there's no reason for it. If you had the ability and the skills and the funds put away and you were able to build a tractor, you should be able to build this throttle. No problem at all. Remember, big tension on the pedal, small tension at the end of the cable up at the carburetor, you won't have any issues. Captain out.